Welcome to our final session of the day, a mayor-to-mayor conversation, local leadership in a pandemic. Please join me in welcoming the President and CEO of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce, Maria S. Salinas.
Welcome again, everyone, to the Chamber's State of LA Business. It has been just truly an amazing day, really great speakers talking on so many wonderful, hopeful topics about our economic recovery. The State of LA Business was designed to convene a broad section of business leaders representing a variety of sectors, education and community leaders, policymakers, to bring those diverse perspectives of how we can create the economy that we want to live in, the inclusive economy that we want to make sure we thrive in. And when COVID-19 happened, like many of you, we had to rethink and reimagine this gathering. And today, in this pandemic environment, it has become more important to convene and to bring together our collective leadership to address the challenges that we are facing. This smaller version of our original plan has nonetheless delivered on its goals to bring thought leaders and the best thinking of those innovative ideas. I am really proud of this next closing session to have with us two amazing leaders, mayors here of cities in the county of Los Angeles. And before we jump right into their conversation, let's hear a few words from our presenting sponsor, Amazon. Please welcome Anthony Williams.
Hi, I'm Anthony Williams, Amazon's Director of Public Policy here in California. Amazon is pleased to be the presenting sponsor of the inaugural State of LA Business. We're also thrilled to be among the newest members of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce. And above all, we're proud to call the LA region home. I too want to thank Chamber President Maria Salinas, Board Chair Danita Willoughby, and the entire team of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce for putting on a wonderful program today. As we look toward a new Los Angeles, I can assure you all that Amazon will continue to create and innovate from right here in LA. And we will always strive to be a good neighbor and partner. This partnership begins by building on the strong foundation that Amazon has established in LA and across California. Over the last decade, Amazon has invested over $50 billion in the state of California. Statewide, we've launched 25 fulfillment and sortation centers, 15 Prime Now or Tech Hubs, over 130 stores including Whole Foods markets, and our innovative Amazon Go stores. We've brought 13 solar energy systems online and deployed 3 Amazon Air Hubs to support our state-of-the-art delivery and logistics systems. The Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach handle over 40% of our global inbound volume. More than 338,000 authors, small and medium-sized businesses, and developers in California grow their businesses using Amazon products and services. Already, we've created more than 91,000 direct, full, and part-time California jobs. We can't wait to see what the future brings, and we look forward to working with all of you in the years to come. I now have the pleasure of introducing our final session today, a mayor-to-mayor conversation on local leadership during the pandemic, featuring Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti and Pasadena Mayor Terry Tornek. On behalf of all of us who live and work in this great region, I want to say thank you to all 88 cities, mayors of Los Angeles County for your leadership during these difficult times.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you so much for your support of the Chamber and your commitment to Los Angeles. We're going to dive right into this conversation, and I'm going to welcome our guest, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, who is with us here, as well as Pasadena Mayor Terry Tornek. And on behalf of our board chair, Danita Willoughby, I want to welcome you to the State of LA Business. So Mayor Garcetti, let's go ahead and jump right in. Since you issued the stay-at-home order in March, did you imagine that we would still be here in this fall struggling to curtail the virus? 7 months later, can you give us your perspective of what is the state of our city in addressing the pandemic?
Well, thank you so much, Maria, and thank you for your leadership and Danita's leadership as board chair. Thank you, Anthony, for your great words. When we were competing and we're the only West Coast finalists for HQ2, I said, don't worry, we already have HQ3 here because there's such a strong presence of Amazon. And it's a real honor to be with Terry Tornek, my friend, my brother mayor, and my weekly call, the three cities or three entities that control our public health. Pasadena has its own, and Long Beach has its own health departments. The rest of us are with LA County, together with Catherine Barger. The four of us as leaders talk every week about the state of our county and our cities and the work that needs to be done to save lives and save livelihoods. But to get to your question, unfortunately, the answer is yes, Maria. As this pandemic was just on its way here, I spent a long time looking at pandemics historically. And I was hard pressed to find ones that lasted much less than a couple of years. Now, I realized we're technologically advanced. We could probably accelerate the development of medicine and or vaccines. But I realized this was not going to be a month or two or three. This was going to dominate this calendar year. And as I said early on, certain things that we expected to be normal would not go back to normal until there was a therapeutic and or vaccine treatment for this COVID-19 virus. And I think as I look back, what we've learned about Los Angeles is two or threefold. One, how incredibly resilient and generous this city is. Two, how many weaknesses in our economy and unaddressed challenges that COVID-19 laid bare, from racial inequity to access to capital and other things. And three, I would say the biggest lesson learned, and I'd ask folks to kind of think this through, is don't think about this in ideological terms, as much as some of our leaders train us to. You aren't a totally pro-open or a totally pro-closed person. You have to learn from this disease and figure out, especially with business, learn the lessons of how we can be safe and still be open, because people's livelihoods and jobs depend on that. We've learned those lessons from the construction trades, now working with other industries that I'm sure we'll get into. But the last thing I'll say is we've also learned the importance of solidarity across our geography, not just in LA, but across the whole Southern California region, a 19 million person mega city that's the third largest economy in the world. If Terry and I couldn't work closely together, if Catherine Barger and I and Dr. Frere couldn't work close together, we would have all gone down together. But Los Angeles has never had a big outbreak. We have managed this, I think, for a very vulnerable, dense, and big city about as well as could be. Now we have to get even more nuanced about making sure businesses and our economy can continue to thrive and maybe even take further steps forward.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Mayor Tornek, maybe you can speak to us a little bit, reflecting upon the smaller cities that are just as robust in their economies. And then after that, I'll pass it back to our board chair, Danita Willoughby, who I know is here. Go ahead, Mayor Tornek.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really rely on the leadership of Mayor Garcetti in a lot of ways. He was clearly ahead of the curve in terms of being informed about the potential duration of this. Frankly, when this all began, we've consistently underestimated it, I think, in terms of what its impacts would be in the duration. And people are fatigued. But we have in Pasadena been able to make great strides because we've been able to identify sort of individual user groups among and between the businesses, and our economic development people have worked with them individually, because what's become clear is that everybody's needs are not exactly the same. The way that certain businesses can continue to function, as Mayor Garcetti indicated, in order to survive, the kind of innovation and creativity that they've shown in terms of modifying their procedures and being able to serve their customers has been quite remarkable. So we've tried to sort of meet them where they are and deal with them on a segmented basis in terms of what the specific needs of each business group have been. And the other point I would like to make is that in Pasadena, we're blessed by having a tremendous number of nonprofit organizations. We have 1,100 nonprofits in our small city. And we've relied on the nonprofits to really help carry a big part of the load here. The city government is simply not capable of dealing with managing this kind of a crisis. And so in many instances, when we were dealing with food insecurity, for example, we relied on those nonprofits that already had those kinds of activities in place and helped them scale it up through funding and providing some additional personnel. And we relied on organizations like the Pasadena Community Foundation to help fund businesses directly. And now we're sending funds to some of the arts groups in town. So we've really tried to be mindful of the differences among and between business groups and try to deal with them with the help of our nonprofits and other businesses to make it work.
Thank you. Hi, guys. I'm joining now. I had some technical difficulties, but I'm glad to be on the line with both of you. Thank you for that comment, Mayor Tornek. And I'm going to shift to Mayor Garcetti. I recall the LA Business Journal quoted a Yelp national study that finds that the city of LA leads the nation in business closures. We've seen that firsthand at the chamber. How can the business community work with you and the government to support businesses that are struggling to survive?
Yeah, thank you, Danita, and great to see you, even if virtually. Glad you could join us, and really happy to be with you to have this conversation today. So I looked at that Yelp study. I mean, New York's number 2. It's mostly, that's in absolute terms, but per capita, we are still top 10. And you look at the cities that were above us: Honolulu, San Francisco, Las Vegas, San Diego, San Jose, and Riverside. Even Austin, looking at permanent closures per capita, was higher. So I don't think there's necessarily geographical lessons there, as much as there are the kind of economy that we have, which is very focused on service, very focused on small business, and very focused on hospitality and tourism. You look at Honolulu, obviously at the very top, you see that in spades because they're so dependent on tourism. But as we've grown that sector to record heights, it's the place that fell the quickest. Second, though, we have, as I mentioned, a lot of small businesses, and we really are the small business capital of America. And one thing that we have learned in this is how many, especially businesses run by 1 or 2 people, businesses of color, businesses run by women, immigrants, don't have access to a lot of the same capital routes and don't even have access to some of the technology. One of the things we're looking at, for instance, to address this is a technology core of, we take community college students who are tech savvy, go to our main streets and help some of these small mom and pop businesses threatened by closure or that have closed down that could get back up to do the most simple things like put up a website for e-commerce, have a square that they can install for contactless transactions. And some of those things, as we talked to small businesses, we heard they couldn't even do those basics because they had never had that technical support. Third, I would say too, it's really critical that government figure out a way to get out of the way. And I hope this is a lesson that we will take post-COVID-19. One of the things I joked early on in this is Democrats have to act more like Republicans and Republicans have to act more like Democrats. When we had agreement in Washington for a moment, I was hopeful about that. Democrats were like, okay, forget all the regulations, just you can do whatever. And Republicans can say, forget being tightwads, here's the money. And we actually reduced poverty, we saved a lot of businesses. In the first couple months, it was a real success story before partisanship came back. And as we heard today, and I'm in regular touch with Secretary Mnuchin and Speaker Pelosi directly, it doesn't look great, but I certainly hope Washington will heed those calls. At the local level, that means things like, hey, the person over here who we had an example of our building and safety inspectors giving fines for illegal signage. And it was a big sign that said, we're open in the pandemic. And I said, that's not what we're here for. Let's take those fines away. Let's figure out a way to, without a fee, get over 2,000 restaurants, for instance, to be able to do our alfresco program. Close down streets where we can, and we do have excess money. Let's build out some of those parklets for them to put tables and chairs out where they might not have those resources. So it's really a combination of trying to think like a business, think entrepreneurial, and get rid of red tape. To me, those are the things, alongside with the technical expertise of access to capital and technology for e-commerce, or just the transactions that need to happen, that are a big part of, I think, how we can stay alive and recover.
Thank you. And I just want to applaud you and your leadership. I know that you took the time to meet with the business community to discuss some of the regulations and motions that we saw before City Council. So we appreciate you listening, and I felt like we made some pretty decent movement there. Specifically, though, Mr. Mayor, is there anything you think the Chamber can do to really lean in and support you? I know we support the Small Business Development Corporation, which is really helping to help small businesses do things like you mentioned, web marketing, technical skills like that. Anything else you want to ask us to lean in and support you with?
No, I just think it's buy local, whether we tell people to shop local or to eat out locally, procure locally. You know, businesses, the bigger ones especially, can make those decisions. It might not be the very cheapest, but this is a moment in which if you're recycling dollars, if it's 10% more to go with a local business, do it right now, because you're going to have a better shot of your business surviving when we're recycling those dollars here locally. And I think that's a really important point to pass on. We have a lot of economic power even in a downturn like this. If we spend that locally and we can help connect people, we're looking at that with our own city dollars. Let's make sure then that we can see those not just be $1 spent, but $3, $4, $5 spent by the time it gets recycled.
I think that's a great idea, local. All right, Mayor Tornek, I'm going to turn it over to you. I understand that you, Mayor Garcetti, and Mayor Garcia of Long Beach have been meeting regularly since the pandemic. How has this collaboration and coordination with these cities been helpful in the response in your recovery efforts?
Well, I think it's been absolutely vital for me. You know, as someone mentioned earlier, there are 88 cities in Los Angeles County. Obviously, LA City is the big dog, and Long Beach is a big city, but most of them are more modest sized. And so Pasadena is included in this group because we have our own health department, and it's been absolutely critical that we convey a unified message. There's a lot of confusion as we've moved through this. In terms of what's open, what's closed, when will it open, you know, why is it not open, why is this business open at a certain percentage and another one not. And so we have to try to present a kind of a unified approach here. Catherine Barger has been very helpful in representing the county in all this, because otherwise people begin to lose confidence that government has a sense of moving in a purposeful and a coherent way. So my voice, I think, is of some value. I hope it's some value in terms of representing what the smaller cities are able to do. We don't have necessarily the range of resources that LA City or even Long Beach has. But I think it's critical for us to be able to articulate in both directions, both what the perceptions are coming from the populations in the smaller cities and what the capacity of the cities are in terms of delivering service. But this idea of having a unified front, a coherent and sensible message as we continue to move through this process and learn together, I think has been absolutely vital. And being able to bring our joint resources to bear, announce things jointly, I think has been very comforting to the population and has certainly served Pasadena well.
I agree with you. There are a lot of mixed messages that were out there. So I applaud you guys for coming together and working to present a unified front. That's so important as we move forward. Thank you for that. Mayor Garcetti, I'm going to turn back to you. From housing and food insecurities to health disparities, this pandemic has exacerbated many of the income and racial disparities that our city has really grappled with for years. How are we addressing these mounting inequalities? And again, what role can the business community play in supporting the city?
Yeah, thank you for the question, because the collision of crises really were interrelated crises. The economy was affected by the health pandemic. Nobody has to choose between, because if we're not doing well on the health side, we know the economy suffers and vice versa. And the racial justice calls that we saw really were already laid out by COVID-19. We actually were the first big city in America to put out an equity officer, and who is now the general manager of our new Civil and Human Rights Department, Capri Maddox, to be able to make sure that everything we were doing had an equity lens, even before people hit the streets after the tragic deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others this year. So we looked, for instance, at the disparity on deaths. Around the country, we saw Black deaths twice the population represented in many cities. We were the first city to cut that away. So now that the Black deaths in LA County are under the Black population at large. by surging testing, working with folks like Anthony Anderson, going into our public housing developments, looking at where African Americans, Pacific Islanders as well, Native Latinos who come from Central America and might speak Spanish as a second language, and other vulnerable populations, including our Native American population, you have to be very specific and intentional with policy, or else people are left behind. And we just say, hey, you know, COVID-19 hits everybody. It's true, it hits everybody without discrimination. But then what happens is different based on community and the pre-existing conditions of communities, if you will, and those pre-existing disparities. Second, in the midst of all the equity calls, we took a brave step forward. I put an executive directive called Executive Directive 27, which the Chamber has been very involved with and we appreciate, to have a chief equity officer, Brenda Shockley, for the first time in the city's history. But every one of our 38 enterprises, as I like to call them, our departments, the busiest port in the Americas, the fourth busiest airport in the world, the #1 municipal utility in size in the country. We all now have department racial equity officers and racial equity plans put together. And we called on the private sector to mirror that. Look at your C-suites, look for a racial equity officer, sign on. And just this past week, we had more companies that have become a part of this. So many of Chamber members have done this, where they're taking essentially that same executive directive and applying it to their tech company, their energy company, their banking company. Bank of America is one of the examples that joined us recently. Verizon was there at the beginning. So big companies as well as very small enterprises, because as leaders, you cannot wait and you cannot miss this moment. You have to meet it. And we welcome anybody who wants to find out more information. Just Google Executive Directive 27, and my team is happy to work with you to implement that in your own company as well.
Thank you, Mayor. I know at SoCal Gas, we've implemented a racial equity action plan, and I've been really impressed with the progress that we've made. And I think it's a great example that you're setting. I also think your strategy to be very specific and intentional in targeting the populations that are underserved with the necessary tools to rebound from this economy are really important. So thank you for that. Mayor Tornek, we talked earlier this week, and you were saying in your city it's a little bit different with regards to the underserved populations. Different. Would you expand on that a little bit for the audience?
Well, I think the issue in Pasadena, we don't see the sort of disproportionate impacts that have been reflected elsewhere. And I think that speaks to the unique nature of each community. I think it's easy to sort of generalize and lump people together, but as local officials, particularly smaller city mayors, we have to make sure that these discussions are fine-tuned a little bit to reflect the actual conditions that exist in our communities. And going back to the earlier point that you were making about the meetings that we have weekly, to be sure that we've got coordinated responses. Part of the virtue of that is that otherwise there's confusion about, people sort of feel in Pasadena, we've got our own health department, our rate of infection is not necessarily as high as some other places in the county. Why aren't we just sort of moving ahead on our own? Why are we being subjected to some of the same restrictions that exist across the county? We need to be clear to people that while there are unique differences and there are important things that we need to do somewhat differently on a community by community basis, that within LA County, people don't respect municipal boundaries. I mean, they live in one place, they work in another place, they recreate in a third place. We can't view ourselves as a series of islands, sort of determining our own destiny. We need to understand that this pandemic is something that affects us collectively, and we have to develop collective responses. That doesn't mean they can't be nuanced, but it does mean that they have to be working together, and we really are, as we've said so many times, we really are in this together.
Nope, I appreciate that. And we're only as strong as our weakest link. So I really applaud all the mayors and leaders working closely together to help get us out of this. I was listening to the sessions earlier today, and I have to tell you, I'm actually inspired. The numbers are looking promising with regard to COVID. There's so much for us to look forward to in our future. So, I want to wrap up and ask for some closing comments, but specifically, Mayor Garcetti, what excites you about our future?
I'm so bullish on LA. I mean, this is my home. I'm a fourth generation native, and I'm going to one day, raise my grandchildren here. This is a remarkable place, and you look at what is there. I kind of joked with somebody, whoever is going to be my successor, I'm going to leave a letter for her or for him that says, this is what's coming. All 10,000 units of HHH housing is going to get built, and we can have momentum on homelessness. The Olympics and Paralympics are coming in 2028. 15 rapid transit lines are being extended or built anew. An airport with a public transportation link is going to be reborn. And I had a list of about 7, 8, 9 things that are just going to happen no matter what. And I was going to joke at the end, I'd say, now just don't screw this up. Love, Eric, and leave that on the desk for my successor. Because, you know, there's so much on automatic through our innovation that will come here. On the flip side, we have to make sure we do it with a conscience and that intentionality to leave no one behind, to really say that there will be a day without tents on our streets, even if it takes us 10, 15 years to grind through that, to say we won't have an economy in which the wealth for Mexican American and Black families is 1/80th of white families in Los Angeles, to look at our education equity, which is, you know, I'm so passionate about in the classrooms for our children. But I'll leave you with 4, and I promise they'll be really quick lessons that I've learned as a leader from this, which is you need to accelerate, innovate, collaborate, and communicate. In other words, accelerate. What I've learned from this is make quick decisions. You can't wait for weeks. This virus has taught us you have to make decisions right away. But second, innovate. Don't be scared about doing new things. You know, 9 out of 10 things we did, we learned something and we're good. The 1 out of 10, I'm sure you could write lots of articles about how we failed. But that is the price of innovation and moving things forward. Third is don't do it alone. Collaborate. It's that conversation. I've so valued Terry's wisdom, and I valued Robert's wisdom and Catherine's wisdom. We've met a dozen times with the 88 mayors. I convene them once a quarter usually, but we've done it, you know, almost once a week on average during this pandemic. And last, communicate. You can be doing all of that stuff, but if you're not telling people who we are, what we need them to do, they are going to feel even more powerless in the most, you know, powerless crisis where we already feel disempowered. But if you're communicating, they asked me today, do you want to do your weekly address? You know, I used to do them daily, then I do them weekly. And I kind of could take a pass, but I said, no, I think I need to. I'm sick of my own voice. I'm sure you are too. But communicating where we are, where we're going, and who we are is so critical to leadership. Thanks so much.
No, thank you. And not only are you communicating weekly, but I love the online information that your office makes available. So if we want to see the numbers, they're there. It's in graphical format. So if we want to see the trend line, we can see it and we can continue to remain educated. I share that optimism. I'm not from Los Angeles. I'm from Chicago, but I love Los Angeles and I'm glad to see you at the helm. Mayor Tornek, what excites you about the future in the city of Pasadena?
Well, like you, I'm not a native. I'm from Brooklyn, but I am raising my grandchildren here, both in Pasadena and Los Angeles, and so I'm very optimistic about the future. I would make the point. I'd like to reinforce the point that was raised earlier, and that is that the pandemic has just shined a very bright light on conditions that we knew about already, and the benefit of that is that we can't ignore them. I mean, a lot of these social justice issues and inequality issues are things that we knew about, things that we were working about, but now we've got a real sense of urgency, and there's no excuse for not continuing to address them in a very intense way. We're going to have to change some of the ways that we manage. We need to work closely with businesses and get out of their way, because a lot of them are very severely challenged by this, and we need to not be an obstacle, we need to be an asset to them. So I remain optimistic. The innovation, enthusiasm, and pent-up demand that's developing, I think, will really come bursting through as soon as our friends, the scientists, take care of the medical part of it. But I'm tremendously optimistic. Pasadena is tired, but remains optimistic, and I welcome the leadership of the business community, and I'm grateful for the leadership that Mayor Garcetti has shown in all of this.
Thank you, Mayor Tornek. So I'm going to use your words when the LA Chamber meets with government officials, quote unquote, get out of our way. Thank you for that. So if I were to summarize kind of what I heard today, which has been a great conversation with our 2 mayors, number one, just the importance of a unified message, and I thank you guys for collaborating and partnering. The other action item, I think, for all of us to take away is the importance of investing in our local economies to help our small businesses rebound in this economy. So thank you for that. We are all definitely in this together, and we will come out of this together. And Mayor Garcetti, I like your 4 pillars: accelerate, innovate, collaborate, and communicate. So with that, gentlemen, I say thank you for joining us today. The Chamber is proud to partner with you, and we look forward to working with you in the future. And Maria, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks, everybody.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Danita, for moderating such a great conversation. Thank you, Mayor Garcetti, Mayor Tornek. Your words are very inspiring during a time when the business community is really struggling, and knowing that you welcome, the input and the feedback and the collaboration. I too wrote those words down, accelerate, innovate, collaborate, communicate. As leaders in this room, in this virtual room, I know that we have members that are ready to meet this moment and that have been meeting this moment. So thank you all once again for that great conversation. As we close our State of LA business, our inaugural, and our virtual presentation of what the business community is experiencing, I have to thank so many that have helped us shape this program. When we said, we're thinking about doing this program, I was so excited that so many of our board members said, raised their hand and said, we want to help. So please help me recognize our steering committee for State of LA Business. We had Brennan Chris with JP Morgan Chase, Celeste Aline with Microsoft Corporation, Chris Thomas and Thomas Wong of Southern California Edison, Claudette Moody and Victor Martinez of WSP, Dennis Rodriguez of Siemens Corporation, Javier Cano of the Ritz-Carlton Los Angeles and JW Marriott Los Angeles LA Live, Nicole Simonian of Crowell and Mooring, and Raul Anaya of Bank of America, and also our incoming 2021 board chair. I'm also grateful for our sponsors. And so one last time, let me recognize them and thank them for their deep commitment to Los Angeles. Our presenting sponsor, Amazon, our gold sponsors, Edelman, Facebook, HNTB, our silver sponsors, AT&T, Delta Airlines, LA Times, Ring, Southern California Edison, Wells Fargo, and our bronze sponsors, Coca-Cola, Valero, and WSP. And lastly, I would like to thank each of you for attending our very first State of LA Business. It is really you, our members, that we look out for, and we want your interests to be known here at the Chamber. And hopefully today's sessions you've learned a little more of the challenges that we're experiencing, but also, like Danita mentioned earlier, just to be inspired about the opportunities ahead. And I want to thank the Chamber team, who has done an amazing job of rethinking State of LA Business and putting it on a virtual platform so that we can all ensure that we're collaborating even when we can't be in person. Today, today we shared a realistic but hopeful view of the state of our region as we tackle this pandemic and the resulting economic crisis. The challenge ahead is immense, but throughout each of the sessions today, there was a strong theme of collaboration, of resilience, and of promise. So I want to thank you all once again for participating. To our board chair, Danita Willoughby, I want to thank you for your leadership in helping us empower us at the Chamber with your leadership so that we could bring programs like this forward to our members. Thank you, Danita. Thank you, all of you, for sharing this state of business with us and participating. Thank you again.